The Texas sun doesn't just shine, it interrogates you. Out here in the hill country, just past the Dripping Springs line, the heat ripples off the limestone like a fever dream by mid-morning. It's the kind of heat that makes the cicadas scream in a rhythmic, mechanical drone that sounds like a failing transformer. And in 2026, a failing transformer is exactly what everyone's afraid of. My name is Wyatt Sterling. Most folks call me Dusty. I spent 30 years as an industrial electrical engineer for the oil fields out in Midland before retiring to my 5 acres of scrub oak and cedar. I've lived through the 2021 freeze when the ERCOT grid folded like a cheap lawn chair, leaving us in the dark for a week while the pipes burst and the world turned white. I told myself then, never again. So I spent my retirement fund, nearly $85,000, on a state-of-the-art off-grid energy fortress. I'm talking about 40 kilowatts of high-efficiency monocrystalline panels, 3 Tesla Powerwall 3s, and a backup Cummins generator converted to run on liquid propane. I wasn't just going green, I was going independent state of Wyatt. The problem? My new neighbor, Savannah Grace Miller. Savannah Grace, savvy to her followers, moved in 6 months ago from a high-rise in Dallas. She bought the farmhouse modern monstrosity next door on a 2-acre lot. She's an accountability influencer. That's a fancy way of saying she films her neighbors and posts it on TikTok and Nextdoor to expose people for not following her version of the suburban dream. It started when I began trenching for my battery sub-panel. I was using a rented ditch witch to cut a clean line through the caliche clay.
I heard a hum that wasn't a cicada. I looked up. A DJI Mavic drone was hovering exactly 10 feet above my head, its 4K eye staring at my work. I looked toward the property line. Savvy was standing on her manicured lawn, holding her phone on a gimbal, narrating to her besties. "Hey guys, look at this," she was saying, her voice pitched for the microphone. "My neighbor is literally digging up the earth without a community harmony permit. It looks like an industrial eyesore. I'm pretty sure he's running an illegal cryptocurrency mine. The noise is literally violence." I shut off the trencher. The silence that followed was heavy. I walked to the fence line, a simple 3-strand barbed wire that had been there since the 50s. "Savannah Grace," I said, keeping my voice deep and level, "that drone is violating the quiet enjoyment clause of our local land use. And for the record, I have a state-stamped permit for this electrical work. It's for solar storage. I'm sure you'll appreciate it when the grid goes down in August and I'm the only one with AC." She didn't lower the gimbal. She just smirked, the sunlight glinting off her designer shades. "Dusty, sweetie, bless your heart. I checked the HOA guidelines. Oh, wait, we don't have an HOA, but I've started a digital one on Nextdoor. And 40 people have already signed my petition to have your industrial battery farm inspected for radiation. You're lowering my property value, and my followers deserve to know the truth." That was the moment, the financial hook. My property value was tied to the legality of my build. If she managed to get a nuisance injunction, I'd be sitting on $85,000 of useless silicon and lead. I'm a man of systems. If a machine is rattling, you don't just kick it, you find the loose bolt. 3 days later, I was at the H-E-B in Dripping Springs, grabbing a brisket and some Shiner Bock. I saw her in the produce aisle, filming a haul video. She saw me and immediately pointed the camera at my cart. "Look, guys," she whispered to the lens, "the crypto neighbor is buying meat, probably a distraction from the fact that his illegal batteries are humming all night. Hey, Dusty, how's the radiation poisoning?" People in the aisle turned to look. I felt that Texas heat rising in my neck. I didn't engage. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. I stepped into her shot and handed it to her. Savannah Grace, this is a formal notice of harassment and intent to file for a private nuisance injunction. It's also a trespass by drone under Texas Parks and Wildlife Code, Section 62.011. You've been over my property 6 times this week. I've documented the flight times and the tail numbers. If that drone crosses the fence again, I'm notifying the FAA about your lack of a Part 107 commercial license for your influencer business. Her face dropped. The savvy persona cracked for a split second. You can't hand me things while I'm filming. This is my workspace. It was a public space, Savannah. Now it's a legal record. Have a nice day. I walked away. I didn't look back. But that afternoon, I went to the post office and sent a certified letter with return receipt requested to her address. I included my electrical permits, my site plan, and a copy of the Texas Property Code, Section 202.010, which explicitly forbids anyone, including HOAs, from preventing a homeowner from installing a solar energy system. I had provided the good neighbor warning. I had the paper trail. Now I sat back and waited for her to trip over the wire. Savvy didn't stop. She went for the throat. The next Monday, I received a notice from the Hays County Environmental and Aesthetic Review Board. Apparently, Savvy had filed a claim that my solar array was built on a shared utility easement and was obstructing a historical drainage basin. If she was right, the county could force me to tear out the panels and the concrete pads. It would cost me $20,000 just in labor to move it, and I'd lose the optimal southern exposure. I called Silas Vance. Silas showed up in an old Ford F-150 that sounded like a blender full of marbles. He got out, spit a stream of tobacco into the dirt, and looked at the pink flags Savvy had planted along what she thought was the property line. "Dusty," Silas said, scratching his beard. "That girl next door, she's got a whole nother level of stupid going on. She thinks the utility easement is hers to manage because the poles run along her side." "Is she right about the drainage basin, Silas?" I asked. Silas pulled out a roll of heavy blue-tinted paper, the original plat map from 1974. He laid it on the hood of my truck. "Look here," he said, his gnarled finger tracing a line. "This parcel was split in '82. When they did it, they recorded an easement by necessity for the back 3 lots. That easement doesn't just cover the power lines. It covers a 12-foot wide strip for utility and drainage maintenance that runs, well, look at that." Silas walked over to Savvy's side of the fence. He pointed to her brand-new $30,000 Infinity Edge swimming pool and her designer privacy wall. "Savvy's pool is sitting exactly 4 feet inside the standard utility setback, and that aesthetic wall she built to block her view of your panels, it's sitting directly on top of the county's primary drainage culvert." I felt a cold grin spread across my face. So she's claiming I'm on an easement while her entire influencer oasis is actually blocking the county's water flow? "Dusty," Silas said, hammering a new iron pin into the ground, exactly 6 feet inside what Savvy thought was her yard. "She didn't just encroach, she's obstructing a public utility. In Texas, that's a big boy problem." Savvy decided to go live when the inspector arrived. She had called the state electrical inspector and the county zoning chief, claiming my battery array was a fire risk and a zoning violation. She was standing by her pool, her gimbal active, her voice trilling for her followers. "Okay, guys, the authorities are here. We are finally going to see the grid-free grump get shut down. Safety is a human right, and his illegal power plant is about to be history." Marshall Thorne, the state electrical inspector, stepped out of his SUV. He didn't look at Savvy. He didn't look at her camera.
He walked straight to my battery enclosure. "Mr. Sterling," Thorne said, flipping open his ruggedized iPad, "I have a report of an unpermitted high-capacity lithium storage array. I need to see your master electrician's seal and your disconnect schematics." I handed him a leather-bound folder. Inside was every receipt, every inspection signature, and my own master PE license from the state of Texas. Thorne spent 20 minutes checking my wiring. He looked at the bus bars, checked the grounding rod depth. I'd gone 10 feet down into the bedrock, and tested the emergency shutoff. "Cleanest install I've seen in 3 counties," Thorne muttered. He turned toward Savvy, who was shoving her phone closer to his face. "Inspector, tell the viewers, is it dangerous? Is it going to explode?" Thorne looked at her like a bug on his windshield. "Ma'am, move that camera 6 feet. You're interfering with a state inspection." He turned back to me. "Mr. Sterling, your system is 100% code compliant. In fact, since you're using UL 9540A fire-tested enclosures, you're actually exceeding state safety standards." Then he looked toward Savvy's house. He frowned. He walked toward the property line, squinting at her pool pump house, the one she had built right against my fence. "Is that a sub-panel for that pool over there?" Thorne asked.
"I believe so," I said. Thorne walked over to the fence. He looked at Savvy's pump house. He looked at the utility easement flags Silas had just planted. "Ma'am," Thorne said to Savvy, his voice dropping into a dangerous official tone, "who did the electrical for your pool and that privacy wall?" "Oh, it was a custom dream contractor from Dallas," she said, still filming. "Why? Isn't the contrast beautiful against the ugly solar panels?" "I don't care about the contrast," Thorne said. "I care about the fact that your pump house is tapping into the utility main before the meter, and you've got exposed high-voltage lines running through a recorded drainage easement. You're not just in violation of the NEC, you're committed utility theft, and you're creating a drowning shock hazard in that pool." Savvy's phone shook. The live stream comments started flying by so fast I could see the red WTF emojis from 10 feet away. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," she stammered. "No," Thorne said, pulling out a roll of neon red stop work and condemned tape. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a public safety emergency. I'm tagging this entire backyard, and since you're blocking a county drainage easement, I'm calling the sheriff to assist in an immediate utility clearance action." I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. The cicadas were still screaming, but for the first time in months, the air felt perfectly clear. The red, condemned tape on Savannah Grace's pool pump house was flapping in the dry hill country breeze like a warning flag on a sinking ship. Marshall Thorne hadn't just tapped her on the wrist. He'd opened a portal to a bureaucratic hell that most Dallas socialites didn't even know existed. But I wasn't done. See, in Texas, if you know a storm is coming, you don't just put up the shutters, you dig the drainage ditch. I sat on my porch that evening cleaning a cast-iron skillet and watching Savvy through my binoculars. She was frantic. She was on a satellite phone, probably because I'd filed a signal interference complaint with the FCC regarding her drone, and she was pointing at the pink flags Silas had hammered into the dirt. She still thought this was a misunderstanding she could talk her way out of with a smile and a bless your heart. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to the Pedernales Electric Cooperative. The second was to the Hayes County Drainage District. "PEC Engineering," a woman answered. "Yeah, this is Wyatt Sterling, out on the Dripping Springs line. I've got a master electrical PE license and a recorded survey showing a Class 1 utility encroachment and a bypass tap on a neighbor's secondary main." The line went quiet for a heartbeat. In the world of power companies, bypass tap is just a polite way of saying someone is stealing thousands of dollars of electricity. "Mr. Sterling," the voice said, much sharper now, "we'll have a line crew and a revenue protection officer at that coordinate by 0900. By 9:15 a.m., the quiet of our road was shattered by the roar of a bucket truck and a heavy-duty county backhoe. Savvy came running out of her farmhouse modern, her iPhone already mounted on her gimbal, her voice hitting that shrill, live stream frequency. "Guys, they're back! The crypto neighbor has brought his government cronies to harass a female entrepreneur again. Look at this massive tractor. They are literally threatening my property."
A man in a PEC uniform, a guy named Grady who looked like he had zero patience for TikTok filters, stepped out of the bucket truck. He walked straight to the utility pole on the easement, the one Savvy had beautified with a wraparound trellis of invasive ivy. "Ma'am," Grady said, not even looking at her camera, "move the vehicle. We're here to clear the right-of-way. That wall and that pump house are obstructing a critical utility corridor." "It's not an obstruction. It's a $40,000 custom masonry feature," Savvy shrieked, shoving her phone in Grady's face. "Tell the 12,000 people watching right now why you're attacking a homeowner." Grady finally looked at her. He pointed to a small hidden wire running from the trellis through a PVC pipe and directly into her pool's heating system, bypassing her meter entirely. "I'll tell him," Grady said, his voice flat as a pancake. "I'm here because you're tapping the main before the transformer. That's a felony in the state of Texas under Penal Code Section 31.04. And since you built this wall directly over the primary county drainage rep here has an order to remove and remediate immediately." The county backhoe didn't wait for her to finish her next sentence. The operator, a guy in a sweat-stained cap, lowered the bucket. The sound of the first limestone block of Savvy's aesthetic wall cracking was like a gunshot. Crack, crunch. "Stop! You're destroying my content!" Savvy yelled, actually trying to stand in front of the bucket. I walked to the fence line, leaning against a cedar post, holding my Yeti tumbler. "Savannah," I called out over the roar of the diesel engine, "I warned you in the HEB. I sent you the certified letter. I told you the easement wasn't fluid, but you were too busy counting likes to count the iron pins. That wall isn't content anymore. It's debris." The live stream didn't go the way Savvy planned. Instead of her followers rallying to her defense, the comments section turned into a shark tank. When Grady pulled that illegal bypass wire out of the ground, showing the world that the eco-friendly influencer was actually running her 100-degree infinity pool on stolen grid power, her brand evaporated in real time. She's stealing power while the rest of us are paying $400 a month? Is that why her house always looked so bright in the freeze? Wait, she's the one who reported the guy for having solar panels? The irony was thicker than the dust in the air. By 2 p.m., her $40,000 wall was a pile of broken rocks being loaded into a dump truck. Her infinity pool, which relied on the pump house that had been built on my land, was being drained by the county because the drowning shock risk Thorne had identified was now a mandatory safety remediation. Savvy was sitting on her designer porch furniture, her gimbal lying on the ground, her face streaked with tears that were finally real. The marshal, the PEC guy, and a county sheriff deputy walked up to her. "Ma'am," the deputy said, tapping a thick stack of papers, "this is a summons for theft of service over $30,000, which is a third-degree felony. We've also got 3 citations for illegal modification of a public utility and a massive fine from the drainage district for obstructing a floodway." I can just pay it," she whispered, her voice finally dropping the influencer lilt. "The fines alone are north of 60 grand, and the restitution for the electricity you've borrowed over the last 6 months,
We're estimating another 40,000 based on the draw of those pool heaters. We'll be seeing you in court in San Marcos." She looked over at me. For the first time, she wasn't looking at me like I was the crypto grump. She was looking at me like I was the guy who knew exactly how the machine worked. "Wyatt," she choked out, "please, can't you tell them it was an accident? I'll move the fence. I'll buy your power. Just help me." I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. The hill country sun was starting to set, casting long golden shadows across my perfectly legal, perfectly quiet solar array. "Savannah Grace," I said, "in Texas, we value two things, our independence and our dirt. You tried to take my independence by weaponizing the grid against me, and you tried to take my dirt because it looked better in a selfie. I didn't destroy your wall. Your own entitlement did. Good luck with the legal fees. I hear the jailhouse doesn't have an infinity pool." The aftermath was a slow, satisfying burn. Savvy didn't just sell her house. She couldn't. With a felony utility theft charge pending and a property that now had a mandatory drainage remediation lien attached to it, she was stuck. She ended up having to take a predatory loan just to pay the Peck restitution and avoid jail time. She stopped filming. The Savvy Miller TikTok account was deleted after the Peck video went viral across the state. Last I heard, she's working as a junior assistant for a real estate firm in San Antonio, far away from any drones or property lines. The farmhouse Modern next door is still there, but it's quiet now. The pool is filled in with dirt, per the county's drainage order, and the aesthetic wall has been replaced by a simple, honest cedar fence. I'm still Wyatt Sterling. I'm still dusty. I was at the H-E-B last Saturday, loading a bag of mesquite charcoal into my truck, when a guy I didn't recognize walked up. He was wearing a Peck cap. "You the guy with the solar fortress out on the drippin' line?" he asked, with a grin.
"That's me," I said. "Grady told us about the bypass tap you found. Saved the co-op a lot of money, Mr. Sterling. If the grid ever hits the fan this summer, don't be surprised if half the line crew shows up on your porch with a six-pack looking for some AC." I tipped my Stetson to him. "The porch is always open. Just make sure you stay on the right side of the flags." I drove home, the limestone dust trailing behind my truck like a comet's tail. I pulled into my driveway, checked my power wall levels, 100%, and sat on my porch. The cicadas were still screaming, and the Texas sun was still burning, but for the first time in years, the only hum I could hear was the sound of a system that was perfectly balanced, perfectly legal, and entirely mine. So, I'm asking you, if a neighbor decided to turn your life into content and steal your peace for a few likes, would you play the victim, or would you find the iron pins and let the truth do the heavy lifting? Drop a comment below. I read every one of them. And remember, in Texas, the line in the sand isn't just a metaphor, it's the law.